Common Council meeting for tonight, Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. All alder persons are present. Please join with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, with that, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or concerns on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That moves us into mayor's business tonight. I've got four things that we're going to talk about. First, I just wanted to thank the members of Kiwanis, the Yacht Club, and the Marina for the great Venetian days that we had, the cardboard boat races and the boat parade on Sunday night. I really am grateful for that. Another cool thing that goes on in Port Washington, and I know that many of you attended. Mr. Sigwart, thank you for your help there in the judging while I was on top of that really nice ladder at the Marina, which maybe the budget needs to include a new 8-foot ladder for the Marina. All right, and with that, then I've got two proclamations tonight. The first one, I'd like to invite the Showalter family up to the podium over there. And we've got a proclamation for the bank, and we are declaring tomorrow Port Washington State Bank Anniversary Day. So, James, Steve, Mark, and Sally, thank you very much for coming tonight and representing both the bank and your family. And I'd like to read the proclamation that will be given to each of you for the 125th anniversary of Port Washington State Bank. So, whereas in 1899, during the administration of President William McKinley, when the United States consisted of 48 states and the state of Wisconsin was 51 years old, and the population of the city of Port Washington was 3,010 people, having jumped 45% from the 1890 census. And whereas on September 11th of that same year, the doors of Port Washington State Bank were opened for the first time, and whereas the two founders, Clarence Hill and George Henry, established an institution that has, to this day, been a central part of our cities and the surrounding communities' development, growth, prosperity, and philanthropy. And whereas for the past 125 years, generations of families have utilized the services and support of Port Washington State Bank, and whereas Port Washington State Bank has supported thousands of people as they've purchased their first car, their first home, built a business, or benefited from their financial services, and whereas the founder's family has continued the vision for 6 generations and expanded across Ozaukee County while providing the same phenomenal customer service for thousands more, and whereas Port Washington State Bank is a pillar of our community. Now, therefore, I, Theodore Knightsky, Mayor of the City of Port Washington, a customer and admirer of Port Washington State Bank, present this proclamation with great enthusiasm to the Showalter family and their employees, and recognize Port Washington State Bank for 125 years of business and contributions to the citizens of Port Washington. Be it further resolved that tomorrow, September 4th, when they celebrate at the Rotary Park Pavilion, that tomorrow will be declared Port Washington State Bank Anniversary Day in the city of Port Washington, and I call upon our community to join in congratulating the Showalter family for their commitment, as well as all of their employees at the State Bank on their 125th anniversary, dated today, September 2024. Congratulations and thank you for all that you have done for our community. If you guys wanted to say something and then...
Am I on? I guess so. Wow, that's one of the most well-crafted proclamations I've heard in a long time. That is wonderful. Thank you so very much, everyone that had some input into that, and obviously we did. I've been elected to speak for the group here, otherwise we'll drone on for hours, my son told me, if we're all allowed to talk. But we're very appreciative of the recognition by the city. Our actual opening date is September 11th, but tomorrow, as the mayor said, we are celebrating it in Rotary Park. One of the things we've done for all of the communities that we're in is to invest in some infrastructure that's recreational in nature primarily, and whether they be splash pads or, in this instance, we underwrote the redo of the pavilion, which was in need of it. It just seems like we were just looking through some old pictures. It was 25 years ago that was erected, and we had a community-wide celebration for that. And we all look the same yet. We don't look 25 years older, but the city's been very good to us. The county's been very good to us, and we appreciate, again, the recognition, and we will give that proclamation a place of honor. My dad could not be here tonight. He has some mobility issues and oxygen and what have you, as you might expect at age 98. But he is still very mentally with things, and just asked me the other day, how did August go? I go, well, I haven't seen it myself yet. The numbers, we just got into September, so he's interested in certainly what we do, and serves as our chairman emeritus yet. So he is the third generation of our family, married to my mother, who was the granddaughter of our founder, and Sally, Mark, and I represent the fourth generation. James is the fifth. And we actually have a couple of my grandkids that are stockholders that make 6 generations of ownership in the company. So we'll keep it going. As long as everybody supports us, we'll continue supporting everyone else. So again, thank you very much. Anything to add?
That was perfect.
We're good?
Yeah.
We're good.
Well, and the
Okay.
last thing is I do want to thank you on behalf of the city for your work with the rec department in redoing the pavilion, adding the Adirondack chairs, which is a great Scrabble word.
Yep,
by
that
the
was
way.
all James's.
Yeah, well,
doing
I got
that.
a nice text on Saturday from Mark Dahl saying, Teddy, great idea to put the chairs in there. And I wrote, not my idea, Showalter family, but thank you. And they have been phenomenal. So it's just one other example of your philanthropic spirit over the period of our lives. And again, those of us who've lived here for a long time know that we used to get Port Washington State Bank recycled paper for our tests at St. Mary's and all the different ways in which that you guys helped us. So on behalf of the entire city council and the city of Port Washington, we're very proud that you have invested so much and we're grateful for it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have to get your photo op. Or in the front.
All right, and the second proclamation for tonight is that this is an important month in the city of Port Washington as well as the United States. It is National Senior Center Month, and Melissa is going to give us an update in a moment here as to the future of leadership at the Senior Center. But I just wanted to make sure to thank and recognize that our Senior Center and the people who attend it, as well as commit to supporting it, have done a really, really nice job creating programming and supporting the seniors in the city of Port Washington. And while we work pretty hard to make sure that we get a new and more respectful environment for our seniors, what they do at the current one is still pretty amazing. 15,752 people impacted in 2023 with different visits to the senior center, and just the opportunity to empower our seasoned citizens in Port Washington. We're just very grateful for all of that. So it is Senior Center Month in the city of Port Washington, and especially in our county. And I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of both the council and the citizens of Port Washington for all the different ways in which you commit to that. So Rich and Deb, if you want to come up here and accept this, I would be grateful and bring it to the Senior Center tomorrow. That'd be great. Okay, and as we move forward with the last piece of mayor's business, I did also want to say thanks to the Senior Center for always hosting the quarterly coffees with the mayor. that is an awesome opportunity for me to have conversations and discuss all the different neat things going on in the city of Port Washington, as well as share what's going on in the rest of the state. So with that, Melissa, I'm going to give you the floor here to give us a couple of updates.
Just wanted to update you to let you know we are doing interviews for the senior center position. We've had some great candidates, so as soon as we have a right fit, we will fill that role and let everyone know. In the meantime, Emily and I are taking anything that needs attention. So if something comes up, like something came up today, we want to make sure there's an event that's happening next Friday. You want to make sure that's being handled. You can shoot myself. Oh, don't shoot me, but shoot us an email or call or let Deb Postel or John Sigwart know. We're trying to make sure we have all our bases covered. But, you know, when someone leaves that's been here 26 years, there's going to be a couple things. So just keep that communication open, and hopefully we'll have someone in place for that. And then also, I wanted to announce that John Crane is our interim Park and Recs director. So anything with the rec department, as always, John's been a solid rock for us, but let him know if you need anything, or again, reach out to me. That's all.
Thank you. All right, any other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, then we're going to go into, we have no officers and staff reports other than the one we just had. And this time we're open for public comments and appearances. You're welcome to make public comments. You have up to 3 minutes. If you need more time than that, please contact myself or the city administrator. Are there any public comments? Okay. Yeah, see you guys later. Thank you. Look at James. Come on, Dad. All right, then just name and address and.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Good, okay. Rich Proctor, I live on 1128 Norwich Trail in Port Washington. I really appreciate what this board does. I think we all are trying to work together. I love the mayor is a Mr. Idea, and that's really good. But I have some blanks in my mind about what's going on with the safety center. So I want to leave you with my 5 questions. And just perhaps we'll address them, perhaps not, but I think it'll help overall. So the first thing is response time, and just what is the current response time for police and fire across the area? We'd say 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, whatever it is. And then what is its response time with the new location fully up and running? Fair comparison. Another question that does pop up among people I run into is, well, if we had 2 locations instead of 1, like lots of places do, what's the impact on our response time, and how does it compare to our standard right now? Then once we address response time, if it's negative, if there's a negative, I'm not saying there is, if there is, please help us with reasons about why citizens should welcome this change. Because response time is one thing, that's all we see from our homes. There's a lot of other things that happen there, but that's kind of what the butt end of it is. So just help us out in terms of explaining the building about how much things will be better, more specifically, because an argument about cost is one thing, but it's also kind of distracting from what's really going to happen to it. Second thing, on the cost side, appreciate all the work that's been done. We got that $33 million beat up pretty good, but it's also blank on furniture, equipment, computers, whatever else you stick inside that building. What's that going to end up being? There are other type of operating costs or utilities, if they're going to be worse or better than downtown, stuff like that, to give us a few, how much are we really signing up for? Last question was, it's been indicated that the impact on a typical $300,000 average house would be the $600. I'd like to see that over the years, because it looks like in the financials, there's a lot of moving up and down. And what is the number year by year, so I can kind of understand where that average works out. And that's all. Appreciate your thoughts on this, and I think you'll expand our understanding of what we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. You timed that well, 3 minutes and 1 second.
Glad for the extension.
Thank you. All right, Senator Strobel?
Well, welcome, everybody, and thank you for making the time for me today. I met many of you before, but I just wanted to have a chance to officially introduce myself once again, because some of you are certainly new. I'm born and raised in Cedarburg, lived there my whole life, so I'm very familiar with the Port Washington, the county, and so on. I'm just a lifer here, and I love it. Wouldn't have it any other way. It's an honor to serve Port Washington, and I very much value the input that I get from residents of the community as well as elected officials. I know Mayor, we've had a number of discussions, and I know he's advocated very well for the community here in terms of what his relationship with the state. And I worked very closely with many of my associates in legislature on both sides of the aisle in a bipartisan manner to get things done with housing, to get things done with law enforcement, to get things done with education. Being on joint finance, I think we've made some decent progress on that stuff. There's always more work to be done, of course. Certainly, one thing I'm really proud of, and I hope it's worked out good for you, is the increase in shared revenue. I believe that was about a 64% increase for Port Washington, a little over $300,000, which is I'm happy to see that we were able to do that and create an ongoing income stream of a percentage of the sales tax throughout the state in order to fund that. So we know that will generally be going up. I think it has every year except two in the last 35 years or something like that. So and again, fire and EMS, that's what that's really all about, to help out with the funding of those needs that so many of our communities have today. So, and I just also want to say one last thing. I did tour the harbor last week with Rob. Very impressive. Your guy there is just doing a wonderful job maintaining that and keeping it in demand. And it's really cool to see that you got such a waiting list for it also. But that's a good thing. You want that demand like that. So again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk here, and we're always available. Don't ever hesitate. If there's ways we can make this state work better for you and the city, that's what we're here to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Strobel. Any other public comments or appearances? Any other public comments or appearances? Okay. With that, then, we're going to move into the next agenda item, 7A, General Government and Finance Committee, a presentation by Bray Architects on a proposed safety building. There is no recommendation from staff at this time. This is a review of the updated cost estimates and the options that we are facing. Gentlemen, as you are putting that together, I did want to say thank you to the team that has been moving this forward as we are stepping into tonight and kind of going with the guaranteed maximum price and putting in place the next steps forward here on what we're going to do for fire and safety. I just wanted to thank Rick Miller and Associates and our firefighters and police men and women for participating in the development and design of this. And I'm just very grateful that you've put something together that's a little more palatable for the community as far as scope of costs, but still putting us in a position for the growth that we anticipate here in Port Washington. And most importantly, for me, a state-of-the-art facility that really brings us into the fold as the county seat and positions the city of Port Washington to support safety, not just for our own city, but for our region. So with that, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Rob, anything to start before we jump in? I'm not surprised. That's good. All right. All right. Council, good to see you. Again, Matt Wolfert with Bray Architects. The agenda item is suggesting this. It's the Bray team here tonight. We've got a large team. The MC group, Rick and Maura are here. Chris from Bray is joining me, and then Corey Henschel from CD Smith. So this has been an ongoing effort, not just one entity working hard, taking feedback from a variety of groups, including you as council. And we're here to update you tonight on the progress since we last met. So we're going to talk in a second about where we're at in the overall development of the project. But what we're looking for this evening is approval to proceed into what we call the construction documents phase. I'll give you a little more input on or feedback on exactly what that means based on what you're seeing tonight and have seen over multiple meetings over the last 4 to 6 months. We did share this with GGF about 2 weeks ago, I think, and they had some good feedback. I think they were a little rushed, so they may have some more questions as they were moving into their next meeting. But GGF has been in the loop on this, and we got this in front of them 2 weeks ago. Things to consider, questions regarding schedule. We are on track to put this project out to bid when we believe, and I think there's a collective we, meaning the MC Group, CD Smith, and Bray, all believe that is the ideal window to bid, which is in the late fall, early winter timeframe. You'll see that on the schedule in a minute. But that does a variety of things. It allows contractors to bid knowing they don't have to put labor and boots on the ground right away. Used to not be an issue, but I think we all generally know where we're at in terms of availability of trades and people in the trades. And so having an on-ramp to those that are going to start work is important to getting more bidder participation. And the more bidder participation, the higher likelihood of more competitive bids. So we don't want to push this to, for example, bid in February and say start in March. We do believe that that will negatively impact the number of bidders we get and in turn impact the costs to the city and the community. And then the other part is we just are still balancing, as we always are with public entities, the goal for square footage, quality, longevity, durability, and budget. That's always a balancing act, and there will be a lot of perspectives and opinions and viewpoints on that. And we're doing our best to continue to balance all of those as we bring this project forward to you. So as I noted, big picture, where are we in the planning process? You can see on the screen there's 3 general phases of the architectural and design process: schematic design, design development, and then construction documents. We are, I'll say midpoint technically, but we're probably even further along than that. We're closer to starting construction documents. We've been able to progress well with great feedback from your leadership team. But big picture, once we enter into construction documents, can we make changes? Yes, but they have to be minimal in nature. For example, we can't say lop off a wing of the building or reduce the square footage or change where bearing conditions are from the structural perspective. Can we change the color of the wall, the type of floor, the way a door swings? Absolutely. But trying to manage the understanding that as we enter into construction documents, we're generally committed to the direction that we are pursuing in terms of a site plan and floor plan with limited ability, without impacting timeline or budget, the rest of the development. We really are entering into the production of very technical bidding documents and construction documents. And that not only involves our architectural team, but it also involves every engineer you can imagine: civil, structural, plumbing, HVAC, electrical. So you're seeing a handful of people, but there's probably 15 to 20 people working on this project every day, full time, to get from where we are to the day we bid the project. So that's why we want to share this, just so everybody understands kind of where we're at in the process. But we are very quickly moving into construction documents, which will prepare us to get the project out on the street, as you'll see on the next slide, for bid later in the calendar year here. So this should look very familiar to all of you, hopefully. You've seen this at multiple meetings when we've come back. We're always trying to remind you of where we're at in the process and where we've been. Obviously, this journey regarding public safety began back in 2023. So we're over a year into the conversation and planning process. Obviously, it gets more real as budgets come forward and as images are shared. And so we're here tonight to hopefully get approval to proceed into the construction documents phase and really get the project ready to go out to bid. We're on track to do that. As we noted, it might actually be just a touch ahead of schedule in terms of where the architectural and engineering side is. But we're on track to get the project on the street to bid late in the year here. So I'm going to turn it next to Corey from CD Smith. Obviously, Council and GGF have asked in the past when we brought the prior budget back to, go back and not, I wouldn't say sharpen your pencil, but make sure you're truly evaluating what are needs and how do we proceed. And so Corey and the team at CD Smith have been doing that over the last few months, and I welcome him to come up and share more about that.
Good evening. So last time we were here, we essentially reported right around a $35 million budget. As you can see, that was based on a conceptual budget. So what has changed from that budget to now is more information, more time, more documentation. So a simple perspective I would use is that previously we had 3 plan pages as part of the conceptual set. with the SD or schematic design set, there's hundreds of pages of information. So deeper dive into where we're at. And again, good news that the overall budget has gone down since then. So since the March 28th budget, the overall reduction is just over $1.1 million. With that, what changed? Essentially, if we break the building down into components, the structure, really it's just alignments on wall types, framing, examples of block versus stud walls, more information around that. Building envelope and facade, you will see in the renderings that there was a reduction in stone, quite a bit of stone on the police department side, where there's a large stone facade wall. Other areas on the front of the building went from stone to metal panels or brick. Finishes wise, again, we have sat down with the core planning team, gone through and identified specific finishes. One of the big things that change, for instance, is in the apparatus bays for both police and fire. It's a sealed polished or a sealed concrete versus a polished concrete, so there's cost savings inside of that. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, again, narratives, more definition around not just the cost per square foot, but systems broke down, what is going in here, and so forth. And then the training tower. So the previous budget had a larger training tower, along with the larger training tower associated with it. Essentially, you have higher install costs, more site laydown area, and so forth. And Joe and his team were able to get a proposal and then therefore reflect the install budget of that. So that budget came down significantly. So with that, as part of the process, we also were looking at, as I went through the estimate with our team, we identified areas that are not currently shown in the schematic design set, but will be adjusted in the design development phase or the construction document phase of items that we could reduce costs. So some of those are related to the site, just going through and basically reducing high density traffic areas. So that's a thicker asphalt pavement at the police department area because of the smaller vehicles, lesser weights. And then there is also signals for emergency vehicles on the two side streets that are not required, but we remove those as well. Structure-wise, we're looking at a different floor system that would just reduce the overall thickness. And then with that, just between the building envelope and the finishes, it's just going through and basically fine-tuning. Examples would be not putting a drop ceiling in a storage closet or items like that that aren't necessary, but also reduce cost overall. So this process has continued and constant communication. It's not just each step of the way that we check this. We have official budgets that we have to report in as part of our obligation. But every week we are discussing financial pieces, keeping track of them, making sure the documents are reflected all the way throughout. So the one thing to point out as well is this, going back to the overall budget here, this does include all costs, including furniture, design fees, IT costs, et cetera. So this is the all-in budget. It's not just the hard construction costs. So with that, back to you, Matt.
Thanks, Corey. And I think it's important as we deliver a set of drawings to the CD Smith team, they're creating budgets. We aren't waiting for that budget to come back, sitting back for a month or 3 weeks, whatever it takes. We're continuing to progress. So the design is always going to be progressing, at least until we get into the construction documents phase a little further. The design is always going to be progressing a little bit, and the budgets will be lagging slightly behind that. That's just typical of the process and has to happen so that we're not creating these really distinct large pauses in the design and engineering process. It's normal. It's something we manage. As Corey noted, he's in all the meetings. He's providing budget feedback that isn't potentially reflected in the formal budget that he has shared, but he knows which changes we're making, and he's recommending changes to save along the way. So the actual budget, I think, that Corey would tell you today is is going to be slightly different than the budget that he prepared formally because the design has continued to progress. And we have begun to build in cost-saving opportunities that Corey has recommended, our team's brought forward, and the city has agreed to. So that is continuing to happen and will continue to happen throughout the process. Just so that's why you know why we're a little lagging sometimes in terms of the budget. That'll settle down a little bit as we get into construction documents when there's less change to scope and direction and more formality of what we're preparing. But it will always be present as we make decisions on opportunities to save or revise. So just one more reminder of where we're at. It remains the schematic site plan. As you can see, this is a concept I think you've all seen many times. You can see there's a large, specifically look at the part-time parking, 19 spaces up above the apparatus bay for fire. When you get an architect drawing a site plan, you're not getting what you want as an engineer drawing a site plan, which you now see on the screen. And so just an example of the level of detail, the intent is still there. You're still seeing the same general flow, location of stormwater management, access points, et cetera, but you're seeing an engineer bringing the perspective of why would we put all that asphalt or concrete in? Are the turning radiuses correctly? Are we meeting parking requirements, et cetera? And so that's what's happening behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis and is brought forward in our biweekly meetings with the city leadership team. Floor plan has generally stayed the same. Not a lot of changes to this plan. Little things here or there, as I noted before, changes of door swings, revisions of exact organization, but nothing significant. Hopefully this looks very familiar to you as council. It aligns with where we've been in the prior meetings and review with you. The exterior has changed slightly, so for a variety of reasons, goal of saving some money in terms of the overall aesthetic of the building, feedback from some council members in previous meetings regarding roof lines and other things. Should again generally look like what we shared in previous conversations, but you'll see some slight changes to the roof pitch over the fire wing. If you can see on the screen, generally in this vicinity, the roof line has changed slightly. The hose drying tower has reduced in scope slightly, just size-wise, it's reduced a little bit. None of this impacts functionality, longevity, really is just the typical evolution of the design process from an original concept, getting feedback from a variety of user groups, implementing that into the design. Hopefully you're still seeing on the screen something that you believe reflects the vision for a municipal public building that's going to serve the community for many, many years and it's on a prominent corridor on the entry into your community. Interior images, the note in red is very important on the bottom. These are even more preliminary than the exterior. We're still developing these. We wanted to give not only yourself as council, but the committee we're working with, just a flavor of what the interior could look like. Some of this has already changed since we created these renderings because we're looking to maximize budget. And so some of these things were not within the confines of the budget, and so we're already scaling back. The goal, as always, is to balance the goal for longevity, durability, maintainability, and still provide a quality, aesthetically pleasing building, and hope you're starting to see some indications of what that could be for Port Washington. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you, and we're happy to field any questions you have.
Excellent. So committee had reviewed this. Anything from committee to add? Mr. Benning?
No, when we reviewed it last week, no, nothing, or last couple weeks ago, nothing significant out of it. Just, again, trying to understand where the cost reductions had been to date and what future reductions might be out there.
And efficiencies along the way.
Right.
Right. And even though the next agenda item is going into the guaranteed maximum price, we're going to work really hard not to play in that contingency area at all,
Correct.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean, there's contingency there. Do we want to take it out right now? No, but I'm hoping we don't spend most of it.
Correct.
So that'll bring our total final cost down rather significantly yet.
Yeah. Council can volunteer for landscaping, maybe reduce, well, probably actually increase costs if we.
Yeah.
I can operate.
We've been there.
Yeah. Any other questions on that? Mr. Gasper?
quick, I don't know if your engineering is far enough, but a quick question about water retention detention on site. The water from here, I believe, would ultimately run to the area detention pond over at Second and LL, or Heritage, I believe is their name to it. Did that pond have enough capacity to handle the runoff from the site without the need of having local ponds? Or, since that is a fairly new pond, or do we need to have them on the site as well?
So Rob, if you want to touch on the specifics of the regional pond, I'll call it, not what we're proposing. And sorry, there's a lot of people. Chris, if you can chime in if you got different information this afternoon than we talked about this morning. So big picture, when we develop a site, and this is a perfect example, we're taking a site that is currently, let's just say, impervious grass, a farm field, for example, and we're placing something on that site that is a parking lot or a building that's impervious. The water is going to flow off that site much faster than when it's a farm field, for example, and absorbing in. So we are always designing to DNR requirements, which is the same amount of water that's currently leaving the site is what we have to create quantity storage for, and then release it from our site at the same rate. So engineers do large, lengthy stormwater management reports that detail out all the assumptions. They go to the DNR, DNR reviews them. So big picture is what we're showing right now are the rough sizing for storing as much water that we release the water from our site at the same rate as it currently leaves the site, which is majority infiltration, which is why you're probably seeing larger ponds maybe than you were anticipating. I can't speak to whether when it leaves what I'll call our pond, the new pond for public safety, does it end up at the regional pond you described? I can't speak to that. Rob, you may be able to.
Okay, so the answer to that question is, so when we size that pond on Second and LL, it is oversized, but the intent from when we designed that was that all, we of course didn't know that the fire and police building was going to be proposed for this site, but our intent was that all new development was going to still adhere to the ordinances that we have. The reason being is because in spite of having, I think, a really good stormwater ordinance that reduces the runoff actually from the 100-year from the 100-year flood down to the two-year design. We still have problems with flooding downstream, and so we want to maximize our protection of our downstream properties. And for instance, I think it was 2020. We had some issues, with that water even from the pond. The pond was overtopping in our 2020 storm. So in order to provide greater protection downstream, we are recommending that we retain on site here as well.
Okay. In that case, with the sections of flat roof over the police department, have we looked at green roof at all with its advantages towards slowing down the concentration times and with thermal and potential roof longevity improvements? Is that feasible, or is that a extremely costly item to consider?
It is feasible in a new building, for sure, but the latter point is valid. It really is a significant cost increase to the project. So while the roofs look flat, they will actually have pitch to them. So we'll be happy to get you up on the roof when the building is done and show you how the roofs are actually pitching, even though you're not going to see that from the road level, to what we call interior roof drains. Those drains will collect the water, will connect them to the stormwater system, which will take them to the pond. And so you won't even see a lot of that water conveyance from roof to pond happening. Not like our homes when it dumps out the gutter and we see where it goes. You're not going to see a lot of that because much of that will be below grade, buried. But we can definitely explore green roofs. It just would come at a cost. And we've done them for clients in the past. It is just not an inexpensive proposition from the perspective of beefing up that structure to support all that additional weight, but then also installing and maintaining the actual green roof itself.
Okay.
Yep, there's also an annual ongoing operating cost associated with a green roof that would have to be factored into that decision.
Okay. One last thing. So one thing that jumps out at me too is on the west side of the building coming up to the fire department, it's a huge paved area coming in. Is there possibilities for reducing that at all to not need such a large paved area to come in? I understand with the trucks coming in, the big wide paved area is definitely easier to get them in. But it is a huge paved area with the downfalls of having a huge paved area.
No, good question. And hopefully if you flip back and forth between, I'll say again, the architectural site plan and the engineering site plan, you're seeing a significant reduction in that paved area for two reasons. A, we didn't need it, and B, it is ideal not to have that much paved area. I would say what we're showing in the engineer plan, labeled Plan Current Site in your handout, that apron, we call it, the concrete area outside of the apparatus bays, is really important for a variety of reasons. We can pull equipment out of the apparatus bays themselves, stage it there, whether that means we're simply doing training, whether it means we're having an activity in the apparatus bay themselves. So it may look like a lot of concrete, but it really is functional in terms of making the apparatus bays function from a training and just general operational perspective. But hopefully you're seeing a reduction in that from the original concept.
Thank you.
Again, to your point, trust the engineers.
And don't trust the architects when it comes to
Right,
site plans.
right.
Trust the
Drawings.
engineers. Agreed.
Jonathan?
I guess most of my questions would lie with the MC group, so I don't know if you guys would make your way to the podium. So knowing that we saw this, well, I guess maybe I should back up. The first question I have is if Kapoor has made any headway with the state DOT. I still maintain some trepidation about getting those easement rights from the state, making sure we're all square there, because I think when that comes into cost, how much that will play into this.
Yeah, the communications with the DOT have been through the engineer that works with Bray, Kapoor, and with Rob. So we're kind of secondhand on that at this point. I don't know, Rob, if you have anything current to report on the DOT itself.
Well, they have our site plan that they requested, and so they go through, so it's now in their appraisal process, which they say can take up to, so that was submitted about 2 weeks ago, the revised site plan. And they say it can take up to 6 months, so I've been in communication with them to try and reduce that amount of time. And then there's a process to try and reduce the cost of the appraisal, and I'm determined to get that cost reduced. I think it's ironic that I think the high value that may come back from the appraisal of excess cost is a result of us making the land more valuable by putting in sewer and water, and so we're going to wind up paying for valuation that we created. So it doesn't seem really fair to me. So we will work diligently, and like I said, I'm determined to pay as little as possible as we can for the excess cost.
So up to 6 months then as a response from the DOT.
Right, that's why we're going to continue pressing on them.
Yeah, and we do, just so everybody knows, in the soft cost, the difference between the construction cost and the total budget, Corey has assumed some of those costs. Do we know they're exactly right? No, it will depend on where DOT comes down. But that's why there are contingencies built into that budget as well to tackle things that we don't know, but there are dollars allocated for those access easements. And I think it's appropriate that the state senator is here and offered a no public comment to help in any way he could this evening. So wink, wink, if there's any support we can get there. Big picture, though, as long as we have the access rights in the site acquired, I'll say by the first part of 2025, we're not anticipating starting construction until March. Be great to have it beforehand, no doubt, but we're not going to impact the overall timeline if we have this wrapped up by January or February.
Sure. So, and then to that point, do we have an update from the county around the acquisition of the land itself? Can we get an update on that as well? From either staff, I suppose, Rob, or?
Well, we have the offer to purchase, and so at any time we're ready to close, I understand.
Correct.
We will go to closing.
Making sure that was enumerated, like we have that awareness. So then I guess to your point, Matt, about being sort of at that, at the end of the design development phase, moving into the construction document phase. So the savings that you guys have realized thus far are appreciated, to be sure. To Matt's point, though, we're at that point where those savings are somewhat ended, right? That we would be set in what we've decided to do, and that $33.5 million is where we'll sort of end up as a not to exceed limit.
Yeah, the opportunities.
Microphone.
That off, sorry.
Sorry about that. The opportunities to cut major costs would affect one of programmer square footage, and we're getting to a point that we're beyond that. Quality of the building, longevity, there are still some decisions we could make there, but we know that the intent is to have this, a truly institutionally built type facility. And then there's aesthetics, and we've got a little more, I think, a little more opportunity and time to deal with some of the interior finishes still, and to some degree exterior finishes. But as Matt indicated, when you get into construction documents, that's when the design team is actually in construction. They're constructing the documents that we're going to use to bid the project, permit the project, and build the project. So that hockey stick of costs goes up to make a change. So you pull out X amount of dollars, you're going to give up some dollars to get there. And maybe some time as well. So yeah, we are getting to the end of some of the bigger cost reduction opportunities.
Thanks. Thank you.
Ori, I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
No, I guess to that point too, right? We're moving into this next budget. Like, believe it, we just did this SD budget. I think in the next week or two, I'll be getting a DD set of drawings, and with that, I think we understand the project very well. And to your point, without changing anything from a scope perspective, anticipate the dollars being where we have them right now.
Sure. Yep, and I guess if you don't mind me continuing, Mr. Mayor. My next question would be around the financing piece of this, Mr. Manuelson. So what we've got currently, we're going to be approaching our city budget time here in a couple weeks. We're planning to borrow $20 million for 2025, 15-ish or 13.5 as we kind of approach that, whatever that final dollar amount for 2026. In terms of the impact to the taxpayers, is there anything else that we can do? $20 million, $13.5 million, is it worth it to spread it out longer to lessen that impact? Are there any other scenarios that we could come up with that would help ease that initial pain?
Just a quick question before you answer that. Is that more relevant and within the purview of our next agenda item? Or do you want to address, I'm not trying to cut off debate. Is that, our next agenda item is to discuss the financing.
Well, I can touch on it briefly if you don't
Okay.
mind.
I would just ask then if when we go into the next agenda item, that we're not redundant on this question for council, if that's okay?
I mean, at this point, we're looking to get to the point where project bidding goes out. Bray and the team will provide some estimates on cash flow needs for the construction of the facility, and at that point in time, staff will be bringing forward probably one or more recommendations on financing options to, again, try to, make the project as affordable from a financing perspective as possible.
Thank you. And thanks for your grace on that. Mr. Sigward?
Early on, this project never had a budget. Just want you to know that. Okay. Somehow we created a budget, but we never approved a budget. Right, Mayor? I mean, normally you design to a budget. We didn't. Okay, that's just understood.
Well, you did just yield the floor to me. We did give them an expected dollar amount when the project started, when Mr. Brown sat down and met with them for the initial scope and gave them a $25 to $30 million range. So the council did not, but the directions they were given from staff through us was that. So
So a $25 million budget was discussed.
$25 to $30 million range for design.
Okay.
That was given at our direction.
During the original or the early stages of the project, we were talking about a 50-year design life, which I thought was not reasonable, okay? And now we're talking about a 30-year life. Could you explain that, Matt? I'm not sure really what the difference is. And physically, is there a difference, or is it in finishes or maintenance or what?
No, I think that's fair. And I think we're trying to continue to balance that goal for longevity and durability, as I've said multiple times tonight, with cost. And some of the areas when a client charges us with, we want this to be a slightly longer building in terms of longevity. We're looking at roofing systems. We're looking at asphalt thicknesses and pavement base types. We're looking at certain mechanical system decisions. We're going to put the mechanical equipment inside, which does cost more today versus putting it on the roof. Even though that would provide reasonable and code compliant airflow, it obviously is a unit that's now exposed to our elements and doesn't last as long. So those are three simple examples. We're looking at flooring. Ideally, we're putting in flooring that is going to not require stripping and waxing on an annual basis. We're putting in flooring that's going to last 30 to 50 years. You may not want it to as trends change and color choices change and all that, but that's a decision for down the road. So right now we are still targeting that 30 to 50 year strategy, correct, Corey? We've still got the longer term roof system included. We've got indoor mechanical equipment included. So we're not recommending looking at that, but we are trying to target that balance of budget and longevity as we make all these decisions. And I should be fair, we being the core planning team, we not being MC Bray and CD Smith. The core planning team and the city leadership is involved in all of those decisions as well. They're making that assessment along with us on what we should keep in versus where we can try to find savings.
Thank you for that. Mr. Sigwart?
I also had a question about what type of efficiency do we see in a combined safety building versus separate operations for fire and police as we've had since day one? Now, there's got to be something to an advantage, okay? Even though when I look at the plan, we could build a fire station today without the police station.
Yeah, and I guess I'll touch briefly on the efficiencies. The second part I will allow as a standing comment from a council member. I don't have an opinion on whether it should or should not be a standalone building or not, but the efficiencies really are gained through some certain space program that they're sharing. They're sharing training space, they're sharing lobby space, bathroom space, conference meeting room, weight fitness center. I believe those are the majority of the shared spaces. The parts you probably don't see are we're sharing efficiencies in site development cost in the stormwater pond. That pond is incrementally less expensive to construct, slightly larger than it is to just construct at the size of fire. The site circulation is going to be more efficient. Yes, there's more asphalt, but we have 2 points of connection. Those are going to be our 2 points of connection regardless of the scale of the building we build. So if we build a smaller building, we're still going to be building a longer drive to access from the second connection. So there's efficiencies there. They're sharing parking. If we built 2 separate buildings, I would say there's going to be more parking to support 2 individual buildings. The site utilities, when we bring them to the site, we're basically bringing, I'll say 1, there's probably 2 water lines, I believe. All of these are coming to the site and they're incrementally larger for the larger building. The excavation is the same. So there's a lot of things I don't think you see directly when you look at a site plan or a floor plan. Yes, is it as simple as saying it would be more efficient to build one, not the other? Of course, right? That's straightforward. It's cheaper to build a 2-bedroom house than a 4. We all know that. But the fixed cost of developing the project is now borne by both projects, both departments, not just one, with the opening of my response being where the actual visible efficiencies occur in terms of meeting space and all the other parts and pieces.
Okay. Any other questions? Move on to the next agenda item then. Mr. Sigwart? Last one. Deal? No, go ahead. Because the next agenda item is the same thing. Okay, all right. All right, so then that takes us into the next agenda item, which is the consideration and possible action on the approval of a not-to-exceed budget for the proposed new safety center and facility. The subject is whether or not we're going to do that. The recommendation from staff is based on the site plan that the council approved as presented at the June 4th council meeting. Tonight is to approve the proposed safety building with a not-to-exceed budgetary cost of $33.5 million. Before I turn it over to you, Mark, I just want to give a historical context for us all to remember how we got here. And as Mr. Sigwart says, I can't help but be a teacher, so I'm going to do that really quickly. A couple of things for us to remember is there's multiple sides to this ledger, and what began this conversation was when we were looking at the deferred maintenance on both of the buildings and their current state. So one of the things as we're talking about spending up to $33.5 million is we're not talking about what it would cost to maintain the current fire department, to bring it up, to maintain the current police department and get it up to speed. The prohibitions that our current facilities do for equipment, training, retention, and attraction of staff, the inability to purchase the right vehicles, the fact that we can't park our own vehicles on our own sites, that we have to put police vehicles in this building, on parking lots, et cetera, and that we had some issues that were brought forward to us. The council sat downstairs, we identified, came to consensus on 4 areas that we wanted to focus on. First one that we decided was Safety Center, the Police and Fire Center being moved to a single location. Second one was to address our Senior Citizens Center or our Community Center. Third one was to update all of our codes and plans so that they were executable. And then the fourth one was to begin to work with the state on a communications plan and a legislative agenda for the council. We've done 2.5 or 3 of those 4 things, and we've got 2 in the bucket and 1 still working on. The thing I would ask us to also remember in this conversation tonight, which I'm excited about, because there's a second side to the ledger, which is the new revenues. So the city planner is putting out an RFP for the potential value of the current property that the fire and police department sit on, that if we execute our current downtown plan would have development there of some residential 2-story condominiums with garages and their own parking solution. That automatically would bring in revenues to offset future costs, as well as development on the west side of town and any other developments that are coming. All of the current mill rates and levy rates are based upon a static budget, and if the city of Port Washington maintains its status quo or only a 1% growth, I'd be surprised. The second thing that we had talked about around this was that we needed to just continue to consider our obligations for safety, and I did appreciate the questions that you had asked. As the city center is changing in response times, the conversation was had that this is now going to be at the juncture of a state highway and a county highway, and being able to respond and move, as well as the fact that with a full-time EMS staff that's going to be potentially rolling, and the police department said it wouldn't matter where they are because their cars, trucks, et cetera, are always on the move. So I just wanted to thank everybody to getting to this point, because this is an important part of the infrastructure of Port Washington. We've got deferred maintenance at at every building we own, with the exception of a water plant that's now being redone, and our filtration plant and our safety center is the next largest. We've got other things to handle, and frankly, $33.5 million is the least expensive this facility is ever going to be. And while we've explored taking buildings on and off of there, it does not take away or retract the significant needs that we have for facilities throughout the city of Port Washington. So I don't get to vote on this, but I wanted to make sure that I just reminded us of kind of how we got to where we're at, where we're heading, and the why. So with that, Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I really don't have a lot to add to that. The current cost estimates have been presented. The site plan was approved by the council for design. Therefore, 1 + 1 gets us 2 as a starting point for the recommended budget to finish executing this process. So that's really the juxta of the memo. I do have a little information on the second page of the memo that obviously recognizes the significant effort and scale of this project will have a tax levy impact on our residents. Once construction's completed and the full financing costs go into effect, we would expect that impact be fairly stable over the next 18 years or so.
With that, Mark, before I let you go and you get more questions, could you just explain on the projected levy, there's a 2-year hurdle that then just kind of drops off over time as other debt in the city is realized or finalized. Can you explain that to council and myself, please?
I'm unclear what you're referring to as a 2-year hurdle.
So on your sheet, it shows the gross debt service cost per household, $1,300. And then down below there, you share the total cost increases that as they change and shift over time with the debt service for the city. Can you explain that?
Is that referring to the 10-year fiscal outlook?
Yes.
Well, I don't have that document in front of me, but in general, I can tell you that there's a variety of outstanding debt, and some of that will be paid off, and well, those debt service costs will be reduced. You know, the ramp up over the next 2 to 3 years on the financing for this project gets reintroduced. Also, please consider that staff had made a number of assumptions in those modeling on future projects and anticipated future financing needs. So it's really just a combination of what we've currently got going and then what we anticipate to have over the next 10 years or so under the outline of that project list that was included with the 10-year fiscal outlook.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Benning.
so I just add on, the Finance Committee has been looking at this very, very hard with Mark and coming up with this 10-year plan so that we can understand what that is going to be. We're going to be meeting on budget planning, but also CIP planning in a couple, 3 weeks. And we met earlier today, and we're going to have a deep dive into our capital borrowing and looking at this in detail and try to understand this a little bit more. But a lot of it is what borrowing is being paid off in the next 5 to 10 years, which will be that reduction. But we still have a lot of other projects, and there's some assumptions that Mark made, in his planning of a number of projects that aren't really fully fleshed out and the numbers finalized at this point. But the Finance Committee, I would say, want to be intentional about completely understanding this and making sure we stay not at the levy limit, the state imposes on us, but our own levy limit that we would like to hold. And we still need to do things for the goods of the city, but also to minimize the impact on the citizens.
Excellent. I appreciate that diligence. We all do. Any other questions? Mr. Sigwart, did you have your question to carry over?
Yeah. This is a little bit hard to ask, but you may have told, Mayor, our team, which we weren't really sure who was on the team because we were never told, okay, a $25 to $30 million budget. But what I was told was a $20 million budget by Tony Brown. Now, the communications between the team and the council were poor at best, because I read about the $35 million estimate in the Ozaki Press. And I consider that to be a failure of communications between that team, as well intended as they were, and the council that has to vote on the budget. And I want you to know that I'm going to be asking for a pause in the design portion of the work until we get our facility study back, which we just authorized, which should be here by the middle of October, because I think it's important that we get a better handle on our annual capital costs so we don't get way behind again in our facilities. So I feel that the angst, I don't feel the angst that the team does to meet a deadline for bidding, because I don't know that the deadline is all as critical as the gain of knowledge that we'll have when we move ahead. So I think we're in a position where we're being asked to approve something during our budget time that's going to be the major impact on our budget. And I think it should be taken in accordance with our budget, not separately.
Alderwoman Postle?
Yes. I have to agree with that sentiment. I asked for a schematic design to see if we could possibly reduce the cost, because when that $35 million amount was communicated to us, it was at stage 4 instead of bringing a dollar amount not to exceed at stage 1 of a project. And Bray has done a beautiful job. That's a beautiful building. However, the internal communications were horrible. We've developed a cadence in GGF for borrowing and spending capital dollars to satisfy the city's long overdue needs and keep the tax dollars as low as possible. That cadence was manageable and it was responsible. This $33.5 million that we're being asked to approve now, so late in the game, at the point of no return, is no fault of Bray, but it's internal communication. This $33.5 million is going to cause us to look at delaying or possibly canceling some of the capital projects that are needed for other things in the city. So no, it's a beautiful design, but the order of events internally and the communication of those events were completely non-existent. Thank you.
Mr. Tierney?
I guess I'm going to have to kind of echo the last two speakers, and I feel bad about this because I've toured the fire department, I've toured the police department. I know you'd have to be a fool to be able to walk through there and say everything is perfect. It's far from it. But as Deb said, I'm very concerned about the impact this will have on our other needs. And when I've heard from taxpayers on this, and I haven't heard from a lot of them, I'll be honest with you, but they say, they constantly will bring up the cost of this, the cost of the EMT service, which they admit they voted for, and but that's going to be added on. Cost of our water and our water rate increases. It all comes out of the same pocket, even though it's not on the tax bill. And they're also facing things like increases in gasoline, increases in food costs. And if I'm correct on this, I read something the other day where the electric company is going to be wanting a big rate increase as well. And it's just, if you're on the edge, or if you're having a hard time holding on to your home, this might push you over. And I really have a big concern about that.
Mr. Pleitner?
I guess for me, to echo Alderman Benning's sentiment about taking a deep dive into our capital outlay and our capital planning for the next 5 years, I think we'll have to be okay with the point that if we do decide to move forward with this project, that some of those projects will have to be delayed or canceled. Alderman Postel, I think that we have to be okay with that decision. And I think we're smarter and better than we were about what's coming up in the next 5 years. So that I think as long as we prioritize this as a need, a public safety need, then we'll have to be okay with delaying some of these other projects, knowing that this takes priority and knowing that it's something that's probably overdue, as the mayor indicated, that a lot of our facilities are. So I guess for me, it's probably about making tougher decisions in the next couple of weeks as we look at our next capital outlay for the next 2 to 3 years to lessen the impact that Alderman Tierney just mentioned, because it is a lot of money to discuss. So I don't want to lose sight of that. I do think that it probably just delays and pushes off a lot of the other projects that we had planned for capital for the next several years, which is to my point about what can we do to lessen that impact up front here in 25 and 26 to afford a $33.5 million building. Thank you.
Mr. Gasper?
I'm also kind of concerned with where we're going with our borrowing plan. And I agree, it probably does make the most financial sense to go forward with the police and fire station together today. However, I'm concerned that we're pushing the boundaries of our means right now based off the current plan. We're looking at changing our roadway projects from repairing roads in the city of Port Washington once every year, doing about a mile of road, so once every 56 years, to pushing that to once every other year, doing a mile of road, so once every 116 years. We're kind of caught in a vicious cycle with our roads that we have to borrow for it every year since the invention of the levy limit. The city of Port Washington was very frugal at the time and was not doing annual road repairs. we're now stuck in where we have to borrow every year for something that should rightly be not borrowed for, but should be coming out of our base levy, but without having a rather hard to explain referendum to change that. And we just had another referendum last year to increase budget, which makes it even harder to go. And the school district's coming up with a referendum. We really can't do much about it. So we're stuck paying more money each and every year because we have to borrow on annual projects than what it would be if we could just move that straight into our base levy and not have to borrow every year. So the state is essentially forcing us to waste money. But that's also helping to trap us into where a project like this, because we're borrowing on these other things like streets that should be in our base levy, that we're caught now that, that's $2 million or so a year we have to spend on that it becomes difficult to keep spending on projects like that, which are absolutely necessary because our water mains are breaking beneath those streets. So those water mains also need to be replaced. That it's very difficult to go and add on this amount of debt if we're going to have to start pushing other items down the road that we're falling behind on the way it is.
I'll have to echo Alderman Turney's comments about the people bearing the tax load. I've heard from a number of people, and especially people, senior citizens, that may not have I have a very good pension and I can probably afford this, but there are a lot of people that are teetering on the edge here. I mean, one of the things in difference to the fire department, the hose tower wasn't supposed to be in there the last time I was at a meeting. That's a big ticket item on that. I appreciate the efficiencies you found already, but you're going to have to find more. People are going to lose their minds when they get the EMS tax bill and they get this on it in a year or two. People are going to be upset. I think the building's fantastic and we should go ahead with it, but I think there are still more efficiencies to be found. Thank you.
Mr. Benning?
So I'll have to agree on the communication issue, and I was involved with the team, as was Alderman Newmeyer and our police and fire department staff. We met for, close to a year before we even engaged with Bray or any professional organization to collect requirements and do those kind of things. With the transition with Tony Brown leaving as our city administrator, there was a stubbing of the toe where the communication about what the project price was at got out of step and it happened. So I'll personally apologize for that one. Was there ever a budget given to the team? No, absolutely not, because we didn't know what it cost to build a building like this, and that's why we engaged Bray to give us an estimate of what a facility would look like at this point, given the requirements that the team had put together and had been scrubbed. And Matt probably can tell better how much time was spent in weekly meetings on scrubbing those requirements. So I just feel like there's been an awful lot of analysis and optimization done already. If I looked at the back row back there between the police department and fire department, they didn't get a lot of what they wanted originally, but they got what they need. And I think that's a compliment to them because they worked hard to get to that point. Do I like the price tag that came in? Absolutely not. But the reality of what we've seen with inflation, with constraints on suppliers and supplies and things like that, this is what the number is. So I know the meetings I sat in, and we did not talk about a budget. Where some of the numbers came from, I'm not sure, because they didn't come from the team. Tony's not here to say what he's told people or didn't tell people. But the first budget I saw was the $35 million that was out there. We had a very frank discussion. The guys can tell it that I challenged them personally to bring that down, but not to bring it down so far that we'd regret it in 5 years or less. Can we go back and analyze this and delay it for another month or two? Sure. Does it make sense to do that? Absolutely not. We can set a not to exceed budget limit. I know these guys will work hard to exceed that or go below that number to make this the best that they can for the citizens. But again, it is what it is to do something like this in 2025 and 2026 going forwards. Yeah, and it's a challenge, and I'm up for the challenge along with my peers on GGF to take a look at our capital borrowing, how much it makes sense to do, at what time it makes sense to do, working with Mark and Melissa to make that happen. So with that, Mayor, I'm going to move that we approve the proposed public safety building with a not-to-exceed budget of $33.5 million for the proposed new public safety building.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Seconded by Mr. Pleitner. Any other questions or concerns? Debate? Mr. Miller, could you step to the podium here for me, please? As we're about to go into this, I just had a financial question I was going to ask it before the motion. If the bid packages were to be delayed a quarter, a season, what are we looking at for 90-day percentage increases on those costs?
There's a lot of facets to that question.
I know it's a loaded question.
And in reality, it takes a little bit of a crystal ball. We certainly have all experienced a high amount of escalation in the construction industry. We've all seen the inflation in our own personal lives. Construction went up quite a bit right after the COVID pandemic. Since then, it's leveled out. I think, and I'll look at Corey here, I think we're looking at about 1.5% per quarter now is about what we're seeing, and that's normal. So if that holds, that'll give you an indication on the escalation itself. If we don't optimize the schedule, we're going to get into potentially starting at a time when we're going to incur winter condition costs, which could, again, Corey, for a building like this, $100,000, $200,000 potentially to heat concrete and to do the masonry. And of course, we find ways to try to optimize that operation. But that maybe not a big number. To us, it is. You'd rather see $150,000, $200,000 go into the building than go into heat and protection. But that'll give you an indication. Now, if escalation rears its head again, and we get up instead of 1.5 per quarter, it's 2 or 3 points. We've seen 1% a month. When things are flaring. But right now we're seeing it fairly normal and stable. So you can apply those percentages and understand what the impact might be.
Okay. So I'm hearing that would be 6% increase to wait a year. 1.5% per quarter, or is that a compounding number that I'm not an actuary, so I can't do that math in my head?
It is a compounding number, but then again, it's not necessarily a straight climb either. It can go up and down. Yeah. So, we normally figure in normal times around 4 to 5% per year in construction escalation. So somewhere between 4 to 6 would be, I think, about right. And then again, you could be looking at some winter condition costs if we don't optimize the schedule.
Okay.
Am I missing anything, guys? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're here today as a result of past councils and groups making the decision to delay it, so I just appreciate that context.
Okay.
Okay, that's the only other question. Any other questions? Jonathan?
Yeah, I guess one more quick point to make. When we get together at the end of the month to talk about the CIP plan, I do want to indicate and maybe foreshadow that I want to be really circumspect about what we're borrowing for the next couple of years. That was to my original question about what we can do for borrowing to lessen the tax impact over the next couple of years as we borrow for a $33.5 million building. I want to be really sensitive to the taxpayers that we don't have to hit all at once with everything that's going on. And I think to Alderman Gasper's point about moving to an every other year schedule for road maintenance, I completely agree with you. I think we shouldn't be doing that. We should be maintaining that every year cadence because we're already behind, as it were. But I think that's a discussion that we should have for the coming years at the end of the decade. So again, I would like to say and forecast that I would probably be looking to delay or cancel some of the projects that we had on the CIP for next year and for 2026, 2027, or delaying them to lessen the impacts on the taxpayers. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so the motion on the floor is to approve the proposed safety building with a not-to-exceed budget of $33.5 million. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Ward 1, I'm going to do a voice vote. Ward 1? Ward 2? Yes. Ward 3? No. Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
No.
Ward 7?
No.
That motion fails. Brings us on to the next agenda item then, 7A3, Ordinance 24-9, an ordinance amending or repealing one-way street design, amending, repealing, and/or recreating parking regulations, and establishing an official stop sign. This is the second reading. The issue is, should the city adopt Ordinance 2024-9 to add signs on Scott Road at West Northport, revise the traffic and parking rules on North Holden between Van Buren and Jackson, and repeal the Sunday morning one-way ordinance for South Webster Street and West Michigan Street. The staff recommendation is to approve the ordinance. I'll turn this over to Rob.
I'll take it since Roger's not here. Again, this is the second reading. There are 12 sections to it. They're all fairly straightforward. I'm guessing you don't want me to go through each section. Are there any questions about any of the points of the proposed ordinance?
If there are no questions, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Is there any questions or concerns on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. That brings us into the last agenda item, New Business Community Development Authority, consideration and possible action on application for a City of Port Washington revolving loan fund for a proposed retail grocery store at 1590 Harris Street. The applicant is Thavisa and Athira, and the issue is, should the Common Council is being asked to review an application for a $25,000 revolving loan fund. The staff recommends to the Common Council to approve the loan fund, and as recommended by the CDA, with the following contingencies. I'm going to let Bob take that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a proposed Indian South Asian grocery store that will be in the former BMO Harris Bank on Highway 32. It is in that commercial condo strip at Sauk and Harris, or 32 and Harris. That bank vacated the space in 2017. It's been vacant since. This use went to Plan Commission at its July meeting. They needed a minor review for use approval. That was unanimously recommended. And then the CDA, after considering the recommendation by the Ozaki Economic Development Corp., recommended the $25,000 loan, and the conditions are listed on your report. Real quick, they are a $25,000 RLF loan is provided to Athira Foods. The loan will be used for the purchase of property at 1590 Harris Drive. Capital improvements or working capital would be the reason for. A loan of $205,000 is provided by Port Washington State Bank, and that the RLF loan is provided with a 5-year term and amortization at an interest rate of 4.25%. That the RLF loan has a 6-month deferral of principal payments, and lastly, a personal guarantee of Rajasari Thavasi and Thavasi Ranga Thavasi principals in Athira Foods LLC. Those are the typical conditions that these revolving loan funds have, and we do have Ozaki Economic Development here if you have any specific questions.
Any questions? Otherwise, I'd be looking for a motion.
Also move, oops.
Go ahead, John.
The loan to, whatever their name is, sorry.
Athira
Yeah.
Foods as recommended by staff. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Benning. Any questions or concerns on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Are there any public comments or appearances this evening? Any public comments or appearances? Seeing none, be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or concerns on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. This meeting is adjourned. Go Pirates.